Hello, class. Today we are going to be talking about the wrist and the hand. And I want you to feel comfortable pausing this video and going back to refresh or strengthen any concepts that you might not grasp the first go around. So, to start off, I want you all to know that the human hand is an extraordinary structure combining strength, dexterity, and precision. The hand consists of a complex system of bones, muscles, tendons, and nerves, which enable it to perform a vast range of movements and functions. As our primary interface with the world around us, the hand is crucial for various tasks, from delicate actions like writing to robust activities like lifting. Its sensory richness, um, it's also packed with nerve endings that are vital for fine motor skills and spatial awareness. Additionally, hand gestures are a key component of nonverbal communication, expressing emotions and intentions. Studying the hand offers deep insights into human anatomy, physiology, and our interaction with the world, making it a fascinating subject in both uh, medical and psychological contexts. Proximal to the hand, the forearm articulates with the carpal bones through the wrist complex, enabling a wide array of actions. The wrist complex is a modified ball and socket joint called a condyloid synovial joint that is composed of two forearm bones, the radius and the ulna, and 8 wrist bones. The 8 bones of the wrist are called carpal bones and are divided into a proximal group and a distal group, including the pisiform, the hamate, the capitate, trapezoid, trapezium, and then proximally the scaphoid, lunate, and triquetrum. The wrist complex is very flexible because of the synovial joint between the forearm bones and the carpal bones. Formed by the distal radius and the ulna, the distal radio-ulnar joint is a synovial pivot joint formed by the articulation between the ulnar notch of the radius and the articular disc and the head of the ulna. The radiocarpal joint is an articulation between the radius and the radio-ulnar disc, which is a triangular fibrocartilage complex with the proximal row of carpal bones, specifically the scaphoid, the lunate, and the triquetrum. The midcarpal joint is an articulation between the proximal row of carpal bones, those being the scaphoid, lunate, and triquetrum, with the distal row of carpal bones, those being the trapezium, the trapezoid, the capitate, and the hamate. The radiocarpal and midcarpal joints share similar ligamentous and capsular support because most of the structures that support the radiocarpal joint also cross the midcarpal joint. These joints consist of a fairly loose but strong capsule. The wrist contains roughly 4 categories of ligaments that support the joints. Those that connect the forearm bones to one another, such as the interosseous membrane, the dorsal and palmar radio-ulnar ligaments, those that connect the forearm bones to the carpal bones, including the dorsal and the palmar radiocarpal ligaments, palmar ulnocarpal ligaments, and radial and ulnar collateral ligaments, which are visualized here. Those between each carpal bone located within this region, such as the dorsal and the palmar intercarpal ligaments. And lastly, those connecting the carpal to the metacarpals, specifically the dorsal and palmar carpo-metacarpal ligaments. The bones, ligaments, and tendons of the wrist provide stabilization of movements at the wrist joints, including adduction or ulnar deviation, abduction or radial deviation, extension towards the dorsal side, and flexion in the palmar side. Moving further into the palm, the carpals connect to 5 metacarpal bones, forming the palm of the hand. One metacarpal connects to each digit. Small bone shafts, called phalanges, line up to form each complete digit. Digits 2 through 5 have a distal, an intermediate, and a proximal phalanx, while the first digit, the thumb or the pollex, only has a proximal and distal phalanx. The main knuckle joints are formed by the connection between the phalanges and the metacarpals. These joints are called metacarpophalangeal joints, or MCP joints, which work like a hinge when you bend and straighten the digits. The phalanges are separated by interphalangeal joints, or IP joints, with digits 2 through 5 containing a proximal and a distal IP joint. The first digit only has one IP joint between the phalanges of the pollex. The digits of the hand are held together by various supportive ligaments that include the deep transverse metacarpal ligament connecting the metacarpal heads of digits 2 through 5, and the phalangeal joint capsule formed by the volar plate on the palmar surface of the hand, which is composed of a fibrocartilage structure and connects the phalanges of each digit to one another and to their respective metacarpal bones. These ligaments are very strong and tighten to keep these joints from hyperextending in the dorsal direction. Lastly, the collateral ligaments, located on the medial and lateral sides of the joint capsules, provide medial and lateral support throughout the metacarpophalangeal and interphalangeal movements of each digit. They run distal and anterior to attach to a corresponding phalanx. The hand acts to adduct from the midline, which is an imaginary line that moves down the center of the third digit. The hand can also flex and extend the digits at the metacarpo and the interphalangeal joints. And can oppose the pollex with the other 4 digits. Many of the muscles controlling the hand start at the elbow or the forearm and cross the wrist and hand. Most of the small muscles that work the pollex and the little finger start on the carpal bones. The bulge of muscle at the base of the pollex in the palm is called the thenar eminence. The four muscles that compose the thenar eminence are the abductor pollicis brevis, which moves the thumb away from the midline, the flexor pollicis brevis, which flexes the thumb, the adductor pollicis, which moves the thumb towards the midline, and the opponens pollicis, which is deeper than the other three, moves the thumb into opposition by pulling it out from the palm and turns the bulk of the thumb towards the other fingers. Each of the thenar muscles begins at the wrist, and each have a tendon that attaches to a different location on the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. Their names provide a suggestion as to their action upon contraction. Another muscle on the palmar side of the hand that moves the thumb is the flexor pollicis longus, visualized here, which flexes the thumb at the interphalangeal joint. The majority of the thenar muscles are innervated by the median nerve. The exceptions are the deep head of the flexor pollicis brevis and adductor pollicis muscles that receive their innervation via ulnar nerves. The flexor pollicis longus is also innervated by the median nerve. The hypothenar eminence at the base of the small finger, or digit number 5, is made up of 4 muscles, but there are only 3 primary muscles. The 4 muscles are the abductor digiti minimi, the flexor digiti minimi brevis, the opponens digiti minimi, and the palmaris brevis muscle. The palmaris brevis tightens the palmar aponeurosis during contraction, thus deepening the curvature of the palm to improve grip strength. The innervation of the hypothenar eminence is entirely via the ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve will travel in the Guyon's canal, which is formed by the hook of the hamate and the pisiform bone in this region down here. The interossei muscles are intrinsic muscles of the hand, located between the metacarpal bones. They consist of 4 dorsal muscles and 3 or 4 palmar muscles. These muscles are responsible for adducting and abducting the digits away and towards the midline, respectively. Synchronously, that is, working together, the palmar and dorsal interossei muscles assist in flexion of the metacarpophalangeal joints and extension of the interphalangeal joints. All interossei muscles receive innervation from the deep ulnar branch of the ulnar nerve. The flexor tendons allow the fingers and thumb to flex or bend in order to grip objects in the palm of the hand. The strong flexor muscles originate in the forearm and form the flexor tendons before entering the wrist. The flexor tendons travel through the carpal tunnel, through the palm, and 2 tendons each travel to the palmar side of each digit. These 2 tendons, the flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus, travel through pulley-like tunnels in the digits to exert their action. The flexor digitorum superficialis attaches to the base of the middle phalanx to flex the proximal interphalangeal joint and the metacarpophalangeal joint. The flexor digitorum profundus tendon attaches to the distal phalanx to flex the distal interphalangeal joint and the metacarpophalangeal joint. The tendons that allow each finger joint to straighten or extend are called extensor tendons. The extensor tendons of the fingers begin as muscles that arise from the backside of the forearm bones, specifically the extensor carpi radialis, brevis, and longus, extensor digitorum, extensor digiti minimi, and extensor carpi ulnaris. These muscles travel towards the hand where they eventually unite to form the extensor tendons before crossing over the back of the wrist joint. As they travel into the finger, the extensor tendons become the extensor hood, which flattens out to cover the dorsal surface of the digits. The component of the extensor tendon attaching to the intermediate phalanx is called the central slip and serves to extend the digits at the proximal interphalangeal joints. The extensor tendon is innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve of the radial nerve. The lumbrical muscles originate from the tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus that inserts into distal phalanges to flex the distal interphalangeal joints of digits 2 through 5. Due to their origin in the palm, the lumbricals do assist in flexing the metacarpophalangeal joints. However, they uniquely move lateral to join the extensor hood before continuing distally as lateral bands that then insert onto the dorsal aspect of the distal phalanx to extend the distal interphalangeal joints. Innervation of the first and second lumbricals is by the digital branch of the median nerve. The third and fourth lumbricals receive innervation from the deep branch of the ulnar nerve. The radial nerve runs along the thumb side edge of the forearm. It wraps around the end of the radius bone towards the dorsum of the hand. The radial nerve gives sensation to the lateral thumb and the dorsal side of the hand from the thumb to the third digit. The median nerve travels through a tunnel within the wrist called the carpal tunnel to give sensation to the palmar surface of the thumb, index, long, and half of the ring finger, and also sends motor branches to the thenar muscles of the thumb. The ulnar nerve travels through a separate tunnel called Guyon's Canal, visualized here. This tunnel is formed by two carpal bones, the pisiform and the hamate, and the pisohamate ligament that connects them. After passing through the canal, the ulnar nerve branches out to supply feeling to the little finger and half of the ring finger. Branches of this nerve also supply small muscles in the palm and the muscles that adduct the thumb towards the midline. Traveling along with the nerves are the large vessels that supply blood to the hand. The largest artery is the radial artery that travels across the front of the wrist closest to the thumb. The radial artery is where the pulse in the wrist can be taken. The ulnar artery travels next to the ulnar nerve through Guyon's canal, mentioned previously. The ulnar and the radial arteries arch together in the palm to supply blood to the palm and to the fingers. The deep palmar branch curves medially around the hook of the hamate to the deep layer of the palm, where it anastomoses with the deep palmar arch of the radial artery. It also gives rise to the palmar metacarpal arteries, which in turn anastomose with the common palmar digital arteries and bifurcate into the proper palmar digital arteries. The superficial palmar arch anastomoses with the palmar branch of the radial artery just deep to the palmar aponeurosis, where it gives rise to the common palmar digital arteries. These arteries then bifurcate to become the proper palmar digital arteries that supply the digits. Lastly, the carpal tunnel is a rigid, narrow passageway bounded superiorly by the transverse carpal ligament and inferiorly by the carpal bones. The transverse carpal ligament is bounded on the radial side by the tubercle of the trapezium and scaphoid, and on the ulnar side by the hook of the hamate and the pisiform bone. The carpal tunnel contains 5 structures, those being the flexor digitorum superficialis tendons, the flexor digitorum profundus tendons, the flexor pollicis longus tendon, the median nerve, and the flexor carpi radialis tendon.